What's up guys, Sebastian here with Walgrace Vintage. Today we'll be talking about 5 tips on how to better use fuzz pedals. Let's dive in. The pedals I will be using for this comparison are the Electro-Harmonix Big Muff, the JHS Supreme, the Maestro Fuzz-Tone FZM, and then finally the Dunlop Fuzz Face. We picked these pedals because we feel like they represent almost like the wide gamut of different fuzzes that you can get available that really sound very different from one another and behave differently with your guitar and with the amp as well. The first step of this video will be about how to use fuzz pedals with an amp that has a bright switch. A lot of us are fans of Fender amps, and Fender amps are notorious for having a bright switch. Some of them have it baked into the channel, some others you can toggle them on and off. And the problem with this is that fuzz pedals are particularly very sensitive to this type of circuits. And a lot of times they might enhance the brightness that the switch gives you in a not so pleasant way. There's a few things that you can do to fix that. The first thing, well, is not turning on your bright switch and cranking up the treble knob of your amp. And that way, you're not gonna run into any of these issues. If your amp has already a baked-in bright switch and you can't turn it on and off, you have the option of clipping the bright cap if you don't want that to happen, or if you don't want such a severe modification, what you could do is to saturate your amp. Once your amp starts to overdrive, the natural EQ starts to hit a peak of compression where it just can't get any brighter or any darker, and it starts to flatten out. Once you reach that point, the bright switch will have little effect on the tone of the amp. We'll be diving in later about how fuzzes interact with amps that are clean versus amps that are dirty. But for now, our recommendation is that if you're gonna use fuzzes heavily, turn off your bright switch. So the second tip will be about how to dial in your amp to use with fuzzes. My recommendation would be to use your amp at least on the edge of breakup. The reason why is because I find that fuzzes work much better when they're running into an amp that already has some gain on it. Doesn't apply to all fuzzes. Some of them sound great through a clean channel, but for the most part, it tends to be the rule of thumb that if your amp has a bit of gain and the fuzz helps to push that sound into a heavier, more distorted tone, typically sounds best with this style of pedals. You could also say the same thing about overdrives, for example. Now, depending on what fuzz you might be using, it could also get really muddy or not. It's just a matter of finding the right pedal with the right combination of amp and guitar. In this case, we're gonna be running this Pro Reverb on the edge of breakup, and we're gonna be testing out different fuzzes to hear that comparison. One of my favorite combinations is a fuzz face and a Stratocaster. It reminds me of Hendrix and Stevie Ray in a way, and it's just a really good sound that in a way helps to compensate for kind of like the thinness that a Strat typically might have, especially in the bridge pickup, and it gives you more of a robust, thick tone that just works well for leads and reacts really well with your volume up. So let's go ahead and test that out. All these pedals react differently whether the amp is overdriven or not. Some of them work with the amp having some overdrive better than they do when the amp is clean, and vice versa. Some others sound muddy when you put them through the amp cranked, and well, they sound good when the amp is clean. For example, the Big Muff sounds fantastic when the amp is 100% clean, but when it's overdriven, it's just way too muddy. And with the Maestro Fuzz-Tone, it sounds fantastic when the amp has some overdrive, great for leads, but if you run it through the amp clean, it's just way too bright and shrill, and it just doesn't work as well. All right, the third tip will be to learn to observe the dynamics that some fuzzes have in relationship to your volume control. What I mean by that is that there's fuzzes that clean up really well, there's others that just don't. And then there's a lot of them that are sensitive to impedance. Therefore, you have to watch out for what is going straight into the fuzz, like whether it's just your guitar straight in, or a wireless system, or a wah-wah pedal. And those things might make a big difference in the way the pedal reacts. Our recommendation is to try to put your fuzzes first in the chain, especially if it's a germanium fuzz, such as Fuzz Face, for example. They tend to be really picky with impedance. Other pedals like the Big Muff, for example, they just don't really work well with the volume control. They don't produce a pleasant sound. They're designed just to be dimed all the way, and they have that specific characteristic about them. Let's go ahead and test this out with the amp both in clean and with overdrive. So this next tip is about experimenting with pedal placement, in particular wah-wah pedals. Many famous players like to use their wah-wahs after their drives or fuzzes, and some of them like to use them before. This has to do with the way this type of pedal reacts, in specific with fuzzes. Not only has to do with the sound, whether it's after the drives, it has a bit more of a drastic effect. If it's before, it's more subtle, but it also has to do with the impedance. Certain fuzzes react differently when they have a pedal running before them that it's on, and it changes, well, the impedance of the guitar sound. So the idea here is to experiment and see which one works better for you. Again, not all fuzzes are built the same way, so a wah-wah might work after certain fuzzes and not before, and vice versa with others. So let's go ahead and try it out. We're gonna have a wah-wah at the end of our chain and another one at the beginning of it, so that way you guys can hear the difference. Alright, so this next tip is about using octave up fuzzes. I find that these type of pedals, even though they offer an octave up sound, they don't really showcase that sound much. It's really how you use your guitar and what is it that you're playing at the moment that makes it sound different. But it's not as random as you might think it is. For example, I find that they really give you that Hendrixy sound if you're playing higher up in the neck past the 12th fret and into the high register. So it sounds like it's very specific, but that's actually how these pedals work best, how they really bring up that octave sound. So let's go ahead and play for a bit so you guys can hear what I'm saying. Alright guys, I hope you found some of these tips useful. If you want to find out more about these pedals, the links will be down below in the description. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. For more content like this, follow us on Instagram at @WildGraceVintage. My name is Sebastian. Till next time.